Abantu abeke bathi mehlo uvalo xa bebona lapho nantsika abazi nama bazenana bakwini bayihlanganise right. So lento ohlala apha ngaphambili ke it moves you away from that banner yeHawks. Yes. Thank you very much. In this session we have we're honored to have the MEC for Transport and Community Safety, MEC Ngata, who is also the acting premier in this forum. We also have MEC Fanta, who is MEC for Social Development. We have MEC Nkubane, the MEC for Public Works. We also have MEC Williams, who is the MEC for Local Government and Traditional Affairs. We are also honored with the presence of the Executive Mayor of Buffalo City Metropolitan Municipality, Councillor Pagat. We have also the Commissioner of Public Service, the Provincial Commissioner of Public Service Commission, Commissioner Sizani. We also have the head IPID in the province, Ms. Tukela. We also have NPA, Advocate Madolo. We have Hawks, we have SIU, we have Border Kai Chamber. We have invited HODs, DDGs, CFOs, people about risk management in departments, and other officials from all the departments in the province, and also members of the Anti-Corruption Multi-Stakeholder Forum. They have all of them been invited into this meeting. So without much ado, I would like to call upon the Executive Mayor of Buffalo City, Councillor Pagat, to come forward and do the opening and welcome. A big round of applause for the Executive Mayor.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of this session, Mr. Mahlubandile Donaldson Kwase, the acting Premier of the Eastern Cape, Honorable Ngata, and the members of the Executive Council present. Provincial Public Service Commissioner, Mrs. Sizani, representatives from all government departments and civil society formations, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is an honor for me to be standing here to officially welcome you to this event held to mark the International Anti-Corruption Day. We're here to support this important event and to make a firm commitment that we will fight corruption as it continues to rob the poor by stifling development. It is our view that one of the key methods of fighting corruption is to have good governance and competent management. The financial systems should have the requisite checks and balances so that both mischief and mistakes are prevented. We have over the years sought to professionalize local government and by extension Buffalo City as a municipality into a true agent of development characterized by the highest ethical conduct among the staff. This is something we're trying to do and is something that we are not going to give up on. The reality is that meaningful development can only be possible if there is a credible democratic institution. This is why one of the key pillars of our strategy is to be a well-governed city, and we can report that we are on course to achieve this. Through a variety of interventions that were deployed, we have successfully fought the odd culture where workers are involved in managerial decisions and also managers involved in political affairs and councillors involved in the administration of the municipality. We have worked to improve the governance of our municipality by having sound political and administrative interface. It is a reality that corruption often becomes pervasive when, in our case, councillors get too close to the tenders. And this is something that should be avoided. A council is an ultimate body regarding municipal management and governance. And the moment councillors are conflicted, we can find ourselves having a very volatile institution. It is our view that the achievement of development objectives relies on there being visionary political leadership driven by high levels of ethical conduct. High levels of ethical conduct, efficiency and professionalism. Both the political leadership and administration ought to serve a higher purpose in tandem with the Batupili principles. This means serving our people should not be viewed as a favor, but a basic requirement for all leaders, managers, and workers. When we are talking about good governance, we talk of the application of best practices in the supply chain management space, prevention and reporting of corruption. We talk of expenditure patterns in line with the approved budget, quality and sustainable provisioning of basic services, and enhancement of citizen participation. Well, we have led an institution that has not had an incident of corruption in the recent past, and that those that are before the courts, such as the Mandela funeral scandal, predates our tenure. Bona ke apha uNkulumbuso bambele sidume kakubi ngalento yokuba imali yamuntu oswelekileyo. And we regret this. We have worked to address the public protector report findings on the scandal, and those who were found to be in the wrong have been processed by the municipality. We are cleaning our institution, and the unqualified audit opinion proves that we are well on track to be a well-governed city. As I conclude, I want to once more officially welcome all the participants in this event and ask that they remain committed to rooting out corruption in the public service and in the private sector. In the public service and in the private sector. Because we believe that in a corrupt relationship, there is a corrupter and a corruptee. Wona ka ufika usomashishini pa kunika intshontsho uthathela intshontsho yako. That is a corrupter, and ultad, then you are then being corrupted. It is a cancer that is eating our society, and it is destroying the credibility of many leaders, contributing to the expansion of the trust deficit between leaders and the people. Soloko besikhokhela noba asenzangalo soloko abantu besikhokhela because of the trust deficit between the leadership and the people. We should therefore continue the fight to ensure that our people are not robbed by criminals in suits. This day should therefore be about committing ourselves towards acting to end corruption and put our country on an upward trajectory. Let us unite to fight corruption. Allow me to close by quoting an acclaimed Russian writer, Leo Tolstoy, who argues that, and I quote, "Since corruption people unite among themselves to constitute a force, then honest people must do the same," end quote. Let us build a solid force against corruption and make life difficult for the corrupt. You are all welcome in Buffalo City Metro. May this be a fruitful International Anti-Corruption Day event. Thank you.
Another big round of applause for the warm welcome. Thank you very much, Executive Mayor, for for setting the scene for this session today. Ndithandile nalandawo ithi masingayiqhelile lento yophila ngemali yabantu abangasekhoyo. Mase ifana notya imali kaNontsizana lento. Ulahleka imali kaNontsizana. Iyahlebisa. Yeah. Thank you very much, Executive Mayor, for the warm welcome. We are now proceeding to the objectives of this session. As the Executive Mayor has indicated that we are commemorating the International Anti-Corruption Day, which is observed internationally on this day. And the Office of the Premier and the provincial government, as well as the multi-stakeholder forum, have agreed that we shift the focus slightly today to focus more on especially the constitutional values that are enshrined in the Constitution for public servants. Hence, the invitation was extended to all HODs, DDGs, CFOs, and other critical components in government departments for the upholding of these constitutional values. But it does not end with the officials of government, but it also goes beyond government to cover even other stakeholders for us to be able to attend to this problem, corruption, and also building ethical governance. The first objective of this session is to encourage a culture within government where all employees, members of the public, and other stakeholders continuously behave with integrity and also promote integrity in their dealings with government, but also as officials. Whatever we do it on behalf of government because we are seen as the face of government. And therefore, whatever we do, we must do it with integrity because we are associated with the government that we are operating in and we are working in. The second one is to improve accountability, efficiency, and effective administration within government, including decision-making and management. Which will also promote that integrity. this issue of accountability, efficiency, and effective administration also talks to just what the provincial management has committed to do is the payment of the exit benefits of employees that have retired, who are still owed monies in the Department of Education, who are still grappling with the backlog ka 2016. And then you ask yourself, kuthiwa baphila njani aba bantu? And they've done so much for the country, and others have worked more than 30 years to 40 years in government. For them to be treated like this, and because they were in the PESAL, so they can't access your social grants because their money is logged in the Department of Education and in other departments. Now others, they have to go to lawyers and eat now on this potential money that is to be released, because they must pay those lawyers at some point, even if lawyers are not going to charge anything, because they know that they are going to get the money and then take theirs. So that's another form of, even if you cannot put it as corruption, but it is not effective administration to do so. Now, others have to bribe our officials to fast track their payments. In fact, they are forced, because their documents are not going to be processed until kufumaneke something. So that's what we mean by this need to improve accountability, efficiency, and effective administration. The third objective is also to ensure that we change aspects in government that is undermining institutional integrity and facilitating unethical conduct, fraud, and corruption. And also ensure that we deal with whatever that begins to allow this unethical conduct and fraud to go unnoticed and unreported. I think the Act is very clear that if you get to know that there's been a corrupt activity and you don't report that corrupt activity, then you are also guilty by keeping quiet. So hence this thing is talking about we must not allow these things to go unnoticed and unreported. I think that's what this means. The fourth objective is to encourage all employees and other stakeholders to strive towards the promotion of integrity and the prevention and the detection of unethical conduct, fraud, corruption, impacting or having the potential to impact on government as a whole. You know, I like what China is doing. Ungayithetha loo nto uyithethayo ngayo ngorhulumente wapha, kodwa bayaqhuba ezi zinto. Thina ungabathuka wena uba uxelele uba ukrokrela ingathi khona ne-dictatorship, but they've been able to deal with poverty. They've been able to create jobs. They've been able to close the gap between the rich and the poor, and also they've been able to address a big chunk of the poverty-stricken and those that are in the far-flung areas, in terms of moving them to better places and accommodation and all that. But what I like with them, they've got MEC Nqatha, what they say, what they call the respect for the rule of law, but they align a rule of law with the rule of virtue. Those two, in China, they go together. They call it the rule of law and the rule of virtue. So a virtue is the good habit. So it becomes a rule that a person must conduct himself or herself, must project those good habits, and it must be a rule. For government to be able to progress, it can't progress without rule of law and without this good habit that everyone must express in whatever he or she does. So that's why kunala order is because of that rule of law, the respect for the rule of law. So bekuthiwe mandigqithe nje kule nto objectives akwajuba ke baze ndigqithele kwezinye izinto ndiyabona ukuba ndingafudumala ndithanda ndena ayomini yam le le mini inabantu bayo apha. We are now going to proceed to the next item, which is unpacking the Section 195 principles as enshrined in Chapter 10 of the Constitution of the Republic. Provincial Commissioner, Ms. Lulu Sizani, from the Office of the Public Service in the province, is going to lead us on that one. A big round of applause for the Commissioner.
Nkosi Hlubi, Program Director, Acting Premier Honorable Ngata, MECs present here today, Executive Mayor of the Buffalo City Metropolitan, Councillor Pakati, members of the Anti-Corruption Forum for the province of the Eastern Cape, colleagues from IPID, NPA, Hawks, and SIU, Bodakai Chamber of Commerce, and perhaps there may be captains of industry present. I haven't seen them, but I acknowledge them this morning. Heads of departments, officials of government, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all. I have been asked to unpack the 9 constitutional values and principles under Section 195, subsection 1 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. But in order to be in line with the deliberations for the day, as we commemorate the International Anti-Corruption Day in recognition of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, I have entitled my talk today, Embracing Constitutional Values and Principles in the Fight Against Corruption. I'm encouraged, Program Director, that the Eastern Cape, I want to believe, is the first province in the country to institutionalize the constitutional values as we are now doing. It is a privilege for me, and I am humbled that I am part of the team that the Premier appointed to serve in the Anti-Corruption Forum for the province, which he established last year already. By the way, I realized recently that not all provinces in our country have established an anti-corruption forum, which again becomes a cherry on top for our province. And I was encouraged by the commitment of our leaders in this province for this initiative. And I believe this is a step in the right direction. Program Director, allow me to open my talk with a statement from Judge Chaskalson, the former Chief Justice, and I quote, "Corruption and maladministration are inconsistent with the rule of law and the fundamental values of our Constitution. They undermine the constitutional commitment to human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedom. They are the antithesis of the open, accountable, democratic government required by the Constitution," close quote. Honorable Acting Premier, it is almost 3 decades into South Africa's democracy, where there should be a celebration of a milestone, but South Africa of today is very different to what all of us envisaged in 1994. No one ever thought that certain state institutions would be deliberately weakened to pursue the project of state capture. It is apparent that the brazen level of clientelism, often called a social order, which depends on relations of patronage, emerged because of the inefficiencies in our institutional structures. The systemic weakness in the implementation of accountability mechanisms, and more importantly, the absence of an intrinsic value system in those that the nation has entrusted with servant leadership. Corruption, Program Director, is a catalyst for decay and stands in opposition to growth and development. And despite the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, it has continued practically unabated. The prevalence of corruption is usually an indicator of the lack of care and interest in the welfare of society, but the fact that it has continued suggests the depravity of those individuals who are intent on pursuing their nefarious interests at any cost. It is among the most prevalent manifestations of unethical conduct in the public sector, but it has multiplier effects such as the weakness and breakdown of state institutions in the provision of services to citizens, such as those that we read about at Eskom and PRASA, a crisis of weak leadership. However, corruption is also rife in the private sector, and the corporate scams that led to the fall of a corporate giant such as Steinhoff and the collapse of VBS Bank are just 2 examples of this duplicitous conduct. If one looks at the causes of the collapse of these institutions, corruption is mentioned as well as non-compliance to standardized corporate governance frameworks, amongst others. This raises a number of questions, such as whether our approach, let's think deeply about this, whether our approach to public administration is fit for the new dispensation, and whether we are responding to the current phase of the revolution. Are we building a rules-driven as opposed to value-driven, unresponsive and unaccountable bureaucracy, governance that has not defined the glue in the political administrative interface? Or do we have the right work ethics in the public service? This political administrative interface is what Professor Mutwa calls a purple area. It's a purple area where rogue elements are found in the public service space. Sometimes the MECs can't operate because there are rogue elements within their departments. They are assigned to do certain work, but they can't do it because there are these rogue elements that are actually sitting in the purple area. So, whatever it is, that is definitely a disjuncture between institutional compliance and citizen satisfaction. Let me make a few points in response to the topic I have been given. Section 195 of the Constitution outlines 9 values and principles. A high standard of professional ethics in the public service. This is about the character and conduct. It is not about filing disclosures because people who are compliance-driven find it very easy to just complete the papers and file them and find a way of hiding some of the things that they are supposed to declare. Professional ethics is about being professional. It is about being trustworthy. It is about being respectful. The manner in which we speak to that old woman from Libode, you speak anyhow because the person doesn't speak English as you do. You speak anyhow because you don't understand that even the salary that goes into your bank account every month comes from that particular person. You are not taking your call because you've forgotten that the cell phone allowance that you are getting, it comes from the very taxpayer that cannot be able to access you. Your number is private. It cannot be given to anyone. It must be given to the MEC. It cannot be given to the public that actually pay that cell phone. Then we go to efficient, economic, and effective use of resources. We can actually go to town with this one principle or constitutional value. Here we are talking about taxpayers' money. We are entrusted with state resources to deliver services to the people and to ensure that those resources are used to what they are intended for as opposed to unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. There are departments who are just on a shopping spree to actually collect irregular expenditure. They are in competition to actually fill a bag of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, forgetting that these resources belong to the public. We talk of developmental-oriented public administration, but we also know that the drive of development orientation stems from a better life for all. A better life for all vision in order to improve social and economic conditions of the people of our country. Then we go to another one which says services that are provided must be provided impartially. They must be provided fairly, equitably, and without bias. The values of human dignity, equality, and advancement of human rights are behind the principle that requires the public services to be provided impartially, fairly, equitably, and without bias. Provision of services. This reminds me, Acting Premier, that as the Commission were in a drive to mobilize and to talk to MECs to help us. This week already I spoke to MEC Williams about it, that we want to take services to the people to the people of Mqhekezweni, to the people of Biki, to the people of Mwati. Those people are far from the services, and even those that are close to the services, it's difficult for them to access those services. Some would go for home affairs services and sleep in a service center for them to be able to receive service. Government officials would actually give them tickets. I've seen it with my own eyes, where people are given tickets. 1, 2, 3, 4, we are serving 30 people today. We are not going to serve more than 30 people. Even if you slept there, even if you took 3 taxis to be able to reach that point, you may not be able to access a service. So we are saying now, we call it a citizens forum. That's how we call it. And we're mobilizing departments to partner with us to actually take home affairs, to take employment and labor, to take COGTA, to take social development, to take health to those communities. We've done it at Link Village last year, where we took services to the people. People were paid on the spot. People were registering for services on the spot. People were taking their IDs on the spot in their own village without going to queue in town. Because some of them, they don't even have money. That's what we are talking about when we talk about services. And the services must be close to the people. If they are not close to the people, they must be taken to the people. What stops us? Then we go to a response to people's needs and public participation in policy making. You know, here the needs of communities must be responded to as an integral part of service delivery. This includes taking services to the people. 3 weeks ago, I was on a radio program and people were calling in. One lady called from Kiskamahuku, and she said, because we're talking about services of home affairs, where the branch in Kiskamahuku is still giving people green books. They know that we're supposed to give them smart cards, but they give them green books. So people, instead of going and take those green books, they go to King Williamstown. So this lady was telling us that we take 3 taxis for us to be able to reach King Williamstown. And when we reach King Williamstown, sometimes you may even go back without receiving the service if you are not, you don't make the number that the officials of Home Affairs want. And by taking these services to the people, we want to prevent that from happening. Then we talk of another value of accountable public administration. Program director here, the people of South Africa has given us the responsibility to be stewards of their resources, and we must be held fully accountable to the owner of resources for what we have done with their resources. This works the same as power. I was talking to MEC Fanda just before we came here in this meeting to say that Section 3, subsection 7 of the Public Service Act is being amended. What they are doing there, they are taking powers from the MECs, the powers of appointment. They are being taken, and they are coming up with legislation to actually take those powers away from them. They are saying they are taking them because they are unable to account for those powers. I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm worried that there is no member of the legislature in this meeting. But I've seen it in Parliament, I've seen it in the legislature. When the HOD comes and the staff, they are sworn in, but the MEC is not sworn in for the powers that rest with the MEC, which are provided for in Section 3, subsection 7 of the Public Service Act. Because they are supposed to be saying, MEC, you have these powers. HOD, you have your PFMA powers. You must be sworn in for those powers. But MEC, you must also account for the power that you are given in the Act, but that is not happening. I don't know why it's not happening, but the reality is that it is not happening. But now they are bringing what they call a solution. I don't see it as a solution, because there are also rogue elements even in those HODs that you are giving those powers. How do you know that they are going to exercise them the way you want them to exercise those powers? But MECs are here, they are allowing it to happen. They are keeping quiet about it. And I'm not going to be the one who's asking questions for them. Maybe it's a debate for another day, because we need to be talking about that. Because we cannot have a situation where people are given powers that they cannot account for. Then another one is fostering of transparency by providing the public with timely, accessible, and accurate information. This is where many institutions fail, as most do not have even service standards. When I was a national commissioner, I went to a district hospital in Pretoria. When I arrived at this district hospital, there were service standards clearly written in a big plug at the entrance of the district hospital. And the service standard was saying, at casualty, the service standard is 6 hours. Meaning that if you are hit by a car, or you are shot, or you are stabbed, you can be attended to after 6 hours. When I asked the CEO about the service standard, he said to me, I don't even know what it means. Actually, I've never seen it. Where did you see it? I said, I saw it at the entrance as you enter the hospital. It is plugged there. He said, I was not even aware. So we sometimes put those service standards without, knowing what they mean. Because if I write a letter to MEC Williams, what is the service standard in his office for him to respond to that letter? Because if there are no service standards, he will respond after 2 months. And by the time he responds, I think that response is no longer necessary. It's like you have not responded. Then we go to another value. I'm told I must unpack these values, and I'm beginning to unpack them now. Good human resource management and career development practices to maximum human potential. Here, we talk of appointments that are above board, as opposed to irregular appointments. I don't know how many times, MEC Ngata, the commission have dealt with this, where people are just, cutting corners when they have to make appointments. The public service is a highly regulated space, and the issue of appointments is regulated. And I'm also talking to you, Executive Mayor, even in municipalities, there's a lot of cutting of corners when it comes to appointments. We talk of placing the right people to the right position at the right time. People think that qualifications is the only thing that you need for someone to be appointed in a position. In the public service, if you look at qualifications only, you will employ every Jack and Jill in the public service, because most of us are highly educated. We are highly educated, but are we able to do what is required? Are we able to serve the people of South Africa, or are we actually undermining the very people who educated us? It reminds me that my mother never went to school at all. She never went to, she didn't understand the concept of education, what it means. And when I told her that I am chosen, I'm going to run at school, and she was shocked. I said, running at school? Are you a horse? Why are you running? because she didn't understand the whole concept of education. He said, I sent you to school to read and write, but now you have become a horse. You are running. But that's where we're coming from. We dare not undermine those people. Those people who set a highway, Pi Highway, Mdantsane, selling vegetables for us to go to University of Fort Hare. But when we come back with our degrees, we undermine the very people that sacrificed a lot for us. I think I'm talking to civil servants. I'm not talking to the MECs, because if I talk to them, I will be talking to the converted. But I am talking to government officials. Think again. When umama wabantu esithi, ndifuna lo mnyango wenza into ethile athi jika turn right and left, you'll see the door on your left. Yintoni enzima uthatha umama wabantu umngenise kula office ubuze ubana kule clerk isebenza apha ingaba niyenza apha lento lo mama uzele into ethile, so that ndijike naye ndimse kule ndawo afanele uncedwa kuyo. But lo minute unoyithatha just to take la mama umse kula ndawo inkulu ayijika left right ungena umnyango awukhathali noba la service yenziwa phaya okanye ayenziwa phaya. I think that's what we are talking about here. Last but not least, a public administration that is broadly representative of the South African people. This needs no further explanation. With departments, we need 50-50. At SMS level, you need to have your gender balance in your departments, not only at the SMS level, even at other levels. But it's not only about a dress. Let's just take anybody who's wearing a dress and ndimfake kwi position. But we mean somebody who's qualified to do the job. Let me remind ourselves of the principles that we have now changed into becoming slogans such as Batupile principles, Abantu Kuqala, people first. Councillor Phakathi spoke about this, the issue of Batupili. It's not a slogan. It's not a slogan. Abantu Kuqala. There is a direct link between the constitutional values and principles and Batupili. Let me provide a few examples. Just a few examples. Values and principles of a high standard of professional ethics translates to the Batupili principle of courtesy. Courtesy. Mama ndingakunceda, tata ndingakunceda. Mamela, kakuhlale phansi umamele uba uthini. You know, my mother used to say when I asked him, umama wami mamchawe, ntombi yasebukhosini, athi, ndibuza uhambe njani ekliniki mama? Bathini ekliniki? Athi, oh mntanam, ubunesi bemkana lalokho imhlophe. Ubunesi bemkana lalokho imhlophe. Ndithe ndisabuza kulo mntana wathi, hayi mama, buza kugqirha wakho andazi into mna. I mean, such things. So we're talking of Batupili principle of courtesy. Ababantu, they need respect from us. We need to respect them. The values and principles of efficient, economic, and effective use of resources translates to the Batupili principle of value for money. Value for money. I don't know, maybe we need to, acting premier Niagui conference, can you tell lento yale tendering system? Uba itini lento yale tendering system? When I was working for the University of Fort Hare, we used to have stores where we would requisition stationery. They would go and buy in bulk and put at the storeroom. So if you need stationery, you would requisition. Now, ipen ubunoyithenga nge-20 rand, ngoku ipen ithengwa nge-120. Ipen eyi-1. Ipen eyi-1, 120. When unako uyifumana ipen nge-20 rand. I think it's something that we really need to talk. If we want to talk about value for money, we also need to look at this tendering system. Because abantu, you can't blame them, because if ucharge 120 for a pen, ucaterishala for this corrupt official, ezawufuna ishare yayo kule mali, abone kuba endaweni uba ibe 20 rand mayibe 120, so that at least ndikwazi ushekelwa yinto. Values and principles of provision of services impartially, fairly, equitably, and without bias translate to the Batupile principle of access. The values and principles of transparency and providing the public with timely, accessible, accurate information translates to the Batupile principle of openness and transparency, as well as sharing of information. The values and principles of public participation in policy making translates to the Batupile principle of consultation. Abantu abaconsultwa ngoku kuyenziwa qha. Abaconsultwa. I don't want to quote a recent case as a Wild Coast. I don't want to quote it because you all know. People must be consulted. E-consultation is not consensus, but it is consultation. Program Director, South Africa prides itself as a constitutional democracy, but the public service and public administration seem not to appear to be imbued with common understanding of development orientation and transformative constitutionalism, which places human rights, capability, and freedom at the center of the development agenda. The public service and society as a whole has the benefit of a value system espoused by the Constitution, and these values are an important role in respect to conduct of everyone in the public administration and the public service. These values and principles must determine how public officials serve the interest and welfare of society and the citizens. It is not the other way around, where some of the few rotten apples in the public service wanted to be served and their hands oiled by those that are employed to serve. We often talk of a high standard of professional ethics which must be promoted and maintained. What does that mean? I've stated earlier on that it talks about the character, it talks about the conduct, it talks about the morals of the human being. They distinguish between what is good and what is bad and go beyond self-interest. Civil servants are key change agents in the public service, and their conduct during the performance of their duties and interaction with members of the public is fundamental. Unethical conduct, amongst others, it's sleeping on duty. People think that when we talk about sleeping, it's people who bring their mat and sleep on it, or their beds. They hang their jackets and then they don't produce a stitch of work with their own computers open in front of them, but there's no stitch of work coming out. As long as whatever we are doing doesn't translate to service delivery, then it must not be done. Even if it's a meeting, there should be no meeting if that meeting is not going to translate to service delivery. In a meeting, we're supposed to be strategizing on how we're going to serve the public better. It should not be about one meeting after the other. No, I didn't do it. I didn't pay the pension payout because I was in a meeting. In fact, the Constitutional Court held in Kamichel judgment that our Constitution is not merely a formal document regulating public power. It also embodies an objective normative value system. For the public service and public administration in general, the value system embraced in Chapter 10 of the Constitution is the starting point of every public service and public administration practice, as these prescribe a particular kind of governance and public leadership for the public service. I want to close. But before I close, I must just mention this one, because I'll skip some of my slides here. The Public Service Commission has been a key player in drafting the National Implementation Plan of the professionalization of the public service. And I'm glad Councillor Phakathi is here, because I think I must share the Public Service Commission bill, where we wanted to include a local government in this professionalization framework, as well as the promotion of constitutional values. This framework is seen by some as catalyst for systematic change in the organization, capacity and ethos of the public sector as a whole, if implemented. However, as a country, we need to improve in the way we do things. We are known to be very good in developing good frameworks, but the implementation remains a challenge. But this is a project that cannot and must not fail, as the constant service delivery protests and the threat of grey listing remind us that South Africa stands on a precipice that will determine whether we succeed or fail. It is therefore up to all South Africans to determine whether it stands or fails. If it is so determined that the country must stand, a way must be found to bring Ubuntu back into all sectors of our society, so that we can prevent the scourge of corruption. And as we prevent the scourge of corruption, we will also be able to find a way to prevent unethical conduct. I want to close with the words of our first democratic elected president, Utata Nelson Mandela Ongasekhoyo. In his inaugural address, and I quote, he said, "Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. Our daily deeds as ordinary South Africans must produce an actual South African reality that will reinforce humanity's belief in justice, strengthen its confidence in the nobility of the human soul, and sustain all our hopes for a glorious life for all." Close quote. Together today, we join forces against corruption and maladministration, and by so doing, we stand and we can take South Africa forward. Forward, Eastern Cape, forward.
A big round of applause for the Commissioner. I heard you, Commissioner, appealing to the leadership to address the issue of the tendering system. Wathi ke kukho inkomfa ekhoyo. Ndiva ke olu hlobo ubetha ngalo abe ngathi usenkomfeni. Ndikuvile uba uaddress masses ndiyakuva ngoba uomishe. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for the issues you are raising, and also simplifying these principles, and also, aligning it to the day-to-day work, and also pointing out to the blind spots that we take for granted, Tina, in the public service. Sometimes we are so used to some of the wrong things. They have become a norm now, an accepted norm, although they are wrong. So continuously we must be reminded of what we are all here to do. This issue, corruption. The current Director General of the World Trade Organization was the former Minister of Finance, as well as serving in the Economic Committee that was established by President Obasanjo in Nigeria to introduce reforms. He wrote a book, Reforming the Unreformable, Lessons from Nigeria. It's a very important book because it has lessons in a country that is within the continent. And those conditions that they were experiencing are in fact, in that book, they are saying, if you read that book, what Nigeria was experiencing in 1999, 2000, 2001, during Obasanjo's time, is exactly what we are experiencing thina ngoku. Engathi sifuna utyibilikela kula unreformable. Because when Nigeria was looked at as so corrupt, dysfunctional in terms of its state, and unreformable. Hence the title of the book, Reforming the Unreformable. So I wouldn't like us to get to that stage. But when you you read that book, those issues that are raised by Okonjo Iweala in that book, so in essence, Sukwi state also in Nigeria in 2000 and 1999, 2001, up to 2004. And it was almost 20 years ago. So these are things that we really need to ensure that we don't allow our country to regress when we have the potential to take it to another level. I'm going to request the technical team there to play the video that will then usher in the Honorable MEC, Acting Premier, MEC Ngata, to the stage.
Yeah. Thank you, Program Director. UTTG Kwase. Uthi Mamufanda angafudumala ethanda. Ngoku yangicinga enye into lento yeMC Williams bamna lento yofudumala ithatha ixesha uye unyuka ke as umoya unyuka. Ngoku ke ndingakhubekisanga nje abefundisi ukhona seseqala nje yathi kodwa uqala ngoku so iza kule nto itshoyo uba ndingafudumala ndithanda so ndiyibambile ngoku kakuhle TTG ndiyabulela ngelithuba TTG ndibulise kuwe ndibulise kwi members of the Executive Council, my colleagues that are here, and ndibulise kumalungu e-Anti-Corruption Forum, mhlawumbe ndiqale ngawo, and ndibulise kwi-Executive Mayor, enkosi kakhulu ngosamkela. Ndicinga ubana la clip idla ugqitywa udlalwa pha ithetha ngelaa ntshontsho obuthetha ngalo uba umntu uqale ngentshontsho ngokucaba akoneli ngoku. Siyavuya ngosamkela Executive Mayor and the representatives of the law enforcement agencies as Koyo Apa, Provincial Commissioner, Public Service Commissioner, Sizani. Thank you very much for a refreshing input, very powerful. And I think that it links quite nicely with what we said at the holding room, honorable members, before we came here, that when we mark this International Day, it should not be like a ritual. And I'm glad that there will be these work streams that we'll have so that we emerge with a program such that when we converge next year like this, we should be able to measure, the progress in this regard. And thanks for the encouraging words. Our province being the only province that has begun to institutionalize the values in the Constitution. And it's quite heartwarming to hear such, as we know that we're also leading in terms of the financial disclosures as a province throughout the country. We're also leading in terms of the lifestyle audit that has been conducted by the Executive Council under the leadership of the Premier, and many other areas, and thanks very much. And I would imagine that the work streams will look at this issue because the input was quite powerful. If we were to programmatically emerge with areas of action from that input is going to help us. And at the heart of that needs for us to pay attention to is the South Africa we have today compared to the South Africa we had when we adopted the Constitution. I think many speakers in many forums, including when we are adopting the provincial safety strategy, this thing emerged, that when you look at the Constitution, dominantly it is about the rights of offenders and possibly perpetrators, not the rights of victims. That include the right to remain silent. People commit various things. The first thing is to affirm their right to remain silent. And these are the issues that requires us to revisit, including the whole issue of parole, that as they get convicted today of life sentence or whatever sentence, it's more like a tick box. They know what to do in order to comply for a parole. So it's malicious compliance. So it might, in many instances, not achieve the corrective intentions of the Department of Correctional Services. So it's quite a range of issues, and I think that that team will help, and thanks Provincial Commissioner, for such insights. And ladies and gentlemen, HODs and all government officials, good morning. Yeah. Molweni. Okay. Oh, that's fine. I don't know, because the sitting arrangement is different now, whether your non-responsiveness, it has got to do with that back banner there of the Hawks. Okay, I'll say something about that later on. And it is indeed a great honor for me to represent the Premier in this quite very critical event, not only for our country, for the world, but more specifically for our country, given the conditions and the challenges we're facing, the increasing levels of inequality and poverty, the increasing levels of lawlessness, the increasing levels of despair, and the rise, of racism, and the rise of gender-based violence and crime. And we're sitting at a very, very important period, and which requires us that we use our Constitution as our mirror and compare what we have and the steps that we need to take in order we can reclaim the South Africa that Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Albertina Sisulu, and many others, the South Africa that they wanted to have. And so it's quite an important period, and therefore I am greatly honored. And the Premier had, an admission to make that as we meet here, we're guided by the United Nations General Assembly resolution to observe International Anti-Corruption Day, this corruption being a universal cancer. He says, if I may paraphrase, that he has a confession to make, that he is in a good mood. He is in a good mood, he says, this year because he's seeing many people now covering their faces as they are going to court, because the fruits of fighting against corruption are beginning to bear fruit. Remember what the PSC said, that at the time of adopting the Constitution, we never envisaged that there will be deliberate and coordinated effort to collapse public institutions with a view to repurpose them and steal from public resources. And therefore to rebuild those institutions as we renew so that they become effective in the fight against corruption. It has taken longer. And the Premier says he's quite excited, feels in a good mood that these institutions are beginning now to do what they are meant to do. And people are beginning to face consequences for what they've done. And in the NAFCOC, I was sharing in the NAFCOC gala dinner, which was here last night, and one speaker representing chairperson of NAFCOC in Chris Hani region, the way that these law enforcement agencies are beginning to bite. He says during COVID, there were these PPEs and all that, and people were busy, and I didn't feel interested in those issues. And he says, hey, ngoku, abantu kunzima ugoduka. Xa ezawugoduka wakho umkhanyo kuba ii-hawks zisemva kwabo. Abantu abakwazi ugoduka funeka aqala ajonge at a distance uba akho nto iphithizelayo napha ngakowabo okanye ngakwakhe. you know, because these agencies are beginning to bite. And, you know, we salute you for that. We want to do more, you know, of that. So that's what the Premier says. And part of what we're saying as a provincial government is that this could not have been possible under the without the leadership of President Ramaphosa. And we feel encouraged that in the midst of all these difficulties, because the network is quite sophisticated, is quite emboldened. You can hear even the kind of bold statements that they are willing to make. You know, that is why PSC again, when you said that you're referring these issues from everybody else, but not to the MECs because they are the converted. In fact, the correct is the opposite. Is the opposite. All of us, we must renew. All of us, we must renew, including us as MECs, because the period that we're emerging on, it was characterized where leadership specifically had their own praise singers. And sapupuma, we became above society. And therefore, it's a period of all of us, we must renew. It must ground us. You know, it must humble us. It must make us earn the respect and the title of the positions we have because of the work that we do. So it's important that these things must talk to all of us in order for the renewal to succeed. So colleagues, the theme of this year is promoting and cultivating a section 195 public servants, promoting and cultivating a section of 195 public servants. We have chosen this particular theme to touch the conscience of the public servants because they have a responsibility to manage financial resources of the people of South Africa. Which goes up again to the point that the PSC was raising, that these offices that we occupy are public offices, and therefore the power we have is public power. It's a borrowed power, not our power. And therefore it's important that we must exercise this power with due care and due consideration because it's not our power and the resources are not our resources. And that the corruption we have seen and that we continue to see in government committed by some of the public servants, it's one of the things that have demonstrated that abanye balahlekelwe zizazela. Section 195 of the Constitution says the public administration must be governed by the democratic values and principles entrenched in the Constitution, including the following principles: the high standard of professional ethics, which must be promoted and maintained; efficient, economic, and effective use of resources must be promoted; public administration must be developmental oriented; and services must be provided impartially, fairly, equitable, without bias. And this issue of services to be provided impartially, fairly, equitable, without bias, these are some of the values that the PSC, she has touched on. But as we talk about providing services without a bias in an impartial way, it's quite an important, sort of a value system in the context we're talking about, which is a factionalized environment, which is sometimes an environment that is unnecessarily politicized. And I used to say when I'm addressing councillors in my other portfolio, to say all the people in this ward, they want to be in the EPWP, whether they are DA, ANC, PAC, and what, they want these opportunities. And all these people here, they want opportunities, whatever faction they belong to. There is no need to politicize and factionalize these things. And this value system talk to that kind of an attitude. And that we must work such that we work against these things that polarize our society. Because it's only a unified effort that contributes in the nation-building project that we can make us, have the capacity to defeat these issues only if we are unified. There are issues that we should use them to pull us together as a province than to divide us. There is no need to factionalize everything, and therefore this calls for that kind of inculcating that kind of a culture, and that people's needs must be responded to, and public must be encouraged to participate in policy making. So it's calling for active citizenry, that people must not be spectators, and they must be forever involved. That Mamofanda, we must not act like as if abantu bayitepu yamanzi sibavulele when we're campaigning for elections. After the elections, we close them. We do as we wish. The people must be forever mobilized and be active participants as we renew and rebuild our country, so that they can hold us accountable. Because it's only an active citizenry and an active and a unified, civil organs of civil society that we can realize the objectives of the Freedom Charter of the people shall govern. It's only at that point. And that point looks beyond ourselves as the ruling party. It looks beyond us. That is why we quite believe that we can only renew if we appreciate that the task of our movement and the role being a leader of society talks beyond our membership. And it's a role we earned because of our exemplary leadership. It's not a tender award. It's something we have earned it through exemplary leadership. And Uba Umakalimo Etandu, may his soul rest in peace. Ati, ANC ikukhokele whether uyayazi nalondo okanye uyazi. Uthetha ke ngombana nge-ANC ekwazi ukukhokela ne-DA, ikwazi ukukhokela ne-PAC, baqhube balandela abayazi bayakhokela kodwa bayakhokele ngenxa exemplary leadership. So that is the kind of thing that we need to do, bring about active citizenry so that people play a central role and leadership is held accountable. And that we must have less of the praise singers. Honorable Pagati, in my other deployment, I said, Mamufand, in fact, I raised it even now, Comrade Upemi Machotina, she was MEC for Arts and Culture. And I said to her, perhaps, why don't we have some kind of a manual or set of values that Mrs. Nigimbongi, Ubakani Bonga promote these values. So that Imbongi ngatlaiphakama pa ithi xolengata zwara because it makes leadership iphupume. So let's have Imbongi as promoter certain values, not promote individuals. Yenzi cult. Yeah, yenzi cult, So those are some of the issues, that are quite important as we rebuild. So nifuna ubongo abangaqhwabiyo. Inkonde ba nangu umuntu ongafuna imbongi ngulowa, so abanye bayazifuna imbongi zabo. Yeah, it's very true. Transparency must be fostered by providing the public with timely and accessible and accurate information. And, before I forget, Lizen, one of these things about using due process, rule of law, virtue, as we did it, what is important is that it helps us to encourage public affairs following these rules, not through proximity. And one of the things which were shared at some point to me by the leadership of NAFCOC in informal engagement, they said to me about this issue of proximity. MEC Ngata, it's quite difficult to do business these days. Those of us who don't have connection, who are not close to some of you in leadership, because we can't compete with some of you in business, which was quite profound, that ordinary business people, they find it difficult to compete with some in leadership that are equally involved in business. Go to the municipality, le tender, gasbanban got in enkokhele ngusbanban. Go to a department, le tender, gasbanban got in enkokhele ngusbanban. So in ordinary business, people with no proximity and connection can benefit in the opportunities of business. I'd find it quite profound thing. And, calling upon leadership, because at these points that we raise to administrators, we should be raising ourselves as political leadership. Because we even regulated with the administrators, they must choose whether they want to be in the administration or in business. Why shouldn't we say same with political leadership? Yeah, so why can't we say the same with political leadership? It's either you decide to be a public rep or you decide to be a business person. Full stop. And other people were saying, there must be something wrong if you are filthy rich and you are a politician, because you can't be filthy rich based on your salary. There must be somewhere else that you're getting the money that you have, And just to share one story without wasting your time. I'm not saying Mamufanda is wrong for leadership to have farms. But when I was at Dr. Dar at Department of Agriculture, it was quite popular with this leadership in a farm. Leadership wrong. So when I was there, it was an opportunity. And there were opportunities. But MC ngafumana amathole ngiqonde nangona ndiwabawela amathole kodwa because you get into this thing, why leadership must be farmers, all of them. Is it true? There might be others who are farmers. Are we farmers? So I'm saying those are some of the issues that we're sort of facing, that we have got to choose whether we really want to be business people or public representatives. And that question we ask to administrators, we must also ask to ourselves. And I know that like with all of us, Mamufanda, not many people like what you say many times. It would apply to me, not many would like what I say, but I have a tendency to say some of these things. So, good human resource management and career development practice to maximize human potential must be cultivated is one of the important values, and public administration must be broadly representatives of South African people with employment, personal management practice based on the ability, again PSC, objectivity, fairness, and the need to address the imbalances of the past to achieve broad representation. Again, MEC Williams, this talk to us, because the size of our movement as a ruling party if there are negative tendencies, they spill over to society. And therefore, the erosion of our non-racialism character, increasingly becoming a PAC, an Africanist organization than this non-racial movement. Increasingly, you see, umbutho wabantu abamnyama ngoku. And those things are reflecting, in the job opportunities, how government get constituted, and how appointments are made. That's the point I wanted to raise. So, alienating quite a sizable number of the population. So these are the things that we must look at, because sometimes they are informed by, these things. And in one department, when I said, looking at the master list, and they would say, "Aba applyanga MSc." That's why bengekho aba applyanga. And I said, perhaps people do not apply because in some instances they have given up. And the other one who was in one department for some time in a particular position of a particular racial group, I asked, you seem to be good and you have been here for some time. Said, and did you apply? Said, no, I did not apply, because I saw no point. I've tried it before. Because these positions are designed for so-and-so who are of a particular racial group, not my group. So we must then act consciously to encourage people to apply. And that's a leadership role, both political and administrative role, to set the tone. People must see from the leadership in terms of what kind of, organization do we want to build, and the kind of, tolerance statements that we want it realized. And just to make a point that without wasting your time, when South Africans are surveyed about their perceptions of the public sector, they always mention corruption as a major challenge. And I must admit that their perceptions are not ill-informed. The Zondo Commission report laid bare the extent of corruption in our country, even worse in the midst of the greatest threat to human life, that is the COVID period, which I've spoken about. So in the latest 2021 report, the Transparency International ranked South Africa amongst the world's most corrupt countries, 70 out of 180 countries. You will all be shocked to learn that in 1996, we were ranked number 23, which was among the less corrupt nations. That was only in 1996. Even by the end of the decade of democracy in 2006, we occupied 43rd spot, though these were signs we were going in the wrong direction. These are a number of reasons that led to the downward spiral, and including the high levels of maladministration, procurement corruption, and abuse of authority. We also allowed the cancer of corruption to set in our law enforcement agencies. We were supposed to prevent corruption, were sort of repurposed, and some of them, including the Scorpions, were disbanded when they were at their prime in the fight against corruption, which remains one of the biggest mistakes our democratic government has made, the disbandment of the Scorpion. So for the perception of the public to change and reflect a citizenry that has hope, people who are corrupt must be arrested and successfully prosecuted wherever they are. So in fact, the bigger the fish, the better, to send a clear message to society that the law is applied equally. Again, the Chinese are quite good at this because they say you're dealing with the flies and the tigers, they refer to the big ones as the tigers. Those are in leadership. So let's deal with the flies and the tigers. Don't have any idea about the tiger recently. I'm referring to the Chinese. Ngoba ndiyazi uba bezawuthi ke uba ebingupremier athi ndiyazi intloko zenu zithambile. That's his language. Ndiyazazi intloko zenu zithambile ningacingenye into ngoku. So we insist that the efforts to fight corruption must be strengthened, and the police and the NPA must be capacitated to restore the integrity of our sovereignty. And these are some of the critical things of building the capacity of the state and the developmental state. And I had argued in the legislature yesterday, I think, or the day before, because we're discussing all these matters in a financial constrained environment. We're seeking to build a developmental state that has this capacity to fight corruption. But we are unable to provide resources to NPA, Hawks, and all of them so that they have this capacity, because we have got limited resources. And I then urge the province that let's begin to go and take the national conference as an opportunity, because from our own provincial policy conference to the national policy conference, we went there with very progressive perspectives, which were going at the heart, the root of the problem. That says, why are we reproducing inequality, poverty, almost 30 years post-1994? It's simply because the economic path that is underway, the policy path that is underway of neoliberalism is a continuation of the apartheid colonial economic path, where in economic terms, the benefits and control of the economy is still going in the hands of the few. So unless we change the direction, we'll be unable to address the issues that we need to address. And our province argued quite strongly that no country in economic crisis has emerged out of a crisis based on austerity measures and fiscal consolidation. It's only on the basis of spending on the economy, ensuring that households have income. That is why in other countries they would give not only 350, more than 350 in deserving households, so that there is demand for goods, because people have money. And therefore the direction we seem to be married with, we said as a province, is not working. And we're saying we're going to the national conference to argue the same, that why must we proceed with something which is not working? Because even if there are changes in terms of, levels of growth in the economy, the margins are next to zero, 1.6, in the face of high levels of unemployment. So it just makes you feel good. So we shouldn't be a leadership that wants to feel good. We must be a leadership that changes the conditions of the people, And if people are not feeling good because their conditions are not changing, 1% growth should not make us feel good. So we must not be a leadership that wants to feel good. So that's the kind of things that are quite very important, because these perspectives were supported by many of the provinces, and many of the provinces in their commissions there use our speaker's notes as the Eastern Cape to argue in commissions. So it's a fight that we must not lose. We must continue this, pursue these perspectives in order to have, because you can't have a developmental state with no capacity, NPA to fight corruption with no capacity, You won't be able to. Cox with no capacity, ESCOM with no capacity to actually lead renewable energy than to be a spectator in the renewable energy space. Because if it's only Lizelle team in the private sector, that is only in the renewable energy space, you know. Correctly so, the role of the private sector is to make profit, you know. And therefore, it's all, if we leave the private sector alone in that area, the cost of electricity, of energy, is going to escalate. It's going to be unaffordable for the majority. That is why then you need to strengthen the public sector, you know, these state-owned entities in order to build the capacity of a developmental state. That includes the NPA. So these are important perspectives in the context of what we're saying, because these things are not delinked. You know, you can't look at the other one, you must look at it as a whole, you know, in order to be able to address, in order to deal with the political economy of corruption. Because that is the political economy of corruption. As a result, we contest again the way one contest business because the province is not an industrialized province. So we must, you know, influence these perspectives. So as a province, we are determined to win the war against fraud and corruption, and the collaborations by different stakeholders that we have will see to it that the goal to root out corruption is accomplished. The Eastern Cape Province's cross-sectoral anti-corruption forum was endorsed by the forum and accepting programmatic activities that we must do. The report we have received on the status of fraud and corruption from various departments revealed that work is being done in the fight against corruption. For instance, 36 cases were under investigation, 36 and 49 were at court already, while 10 were awaiting a decision by the courts. The feedback we received from the SIU on the status of PPE investigations in the provincial departments is as follows: 200 cases finalized matters with irregularities and more than 1 billion, and 448 finalized matters with no irregularities, more than 1.4 billion, and 10 disciplinary matters referred to the departments, including the Department of Public Works, Education and Health, and 17 criminal matters affecting Department of Education and Health are referred to the NPA, and 7 civil litigation matters affecting Department of Education, Health and Human Settlement were referred to the Special Tribunal and the High Courts. And so as we observed this year's Anti-Corruption Day, we must salute whistleblowers who lift the lead on the corruption. If it was not for the whistleblowers, we would not have known about state capture. Whistleblowers are paying a heavy price for exposing corruption. People are harassed out of their jobs, and others are murdered for exposing corruption. So the killing of the official at the Department of Health in Gauteng, Dio Karen. Yeah, do you so busy? Still has a lot. You see, one of the issues I had raised, you see, as news in Doge, you know, just my views, not government views. Just my views. The other view, which I hold quite seriously, around this issue of whistleblowers, it does appear to me that there is an issue to be discussed about SARS and the compensation that is given to people who are dealt with as a result of state capture. And they say that that is emerging from the commission that they had there. And that they are already signed agreements to compensate certain staff members at SARS. And they won't disclose individual figures to be paid, but they will disclose the total amount. I said, there is a need for transparency there. But I'm also raising an issue that we have lost the whistleblowers. All South Africans are a victim of state capture, load shedding, and stuff. Is it really a good thing for some to be compensated at SARS because of what they suffered as a result of state capture? Is it the right thing to do? Why it mustn't be reviewed? How do you explain not to give compensation to those whistleblowers who were killed as a result of these things? So I'm deeply worried about that issue, but it doesn't seem to be an issue that we're taking up for a serious discussion. That must really SARS go ahead with this, irrespective of whatever that commission said, because the commission was looking at SARS, you know, but when you make decisions, you must appreciate those decisions have implications for the whole country. Because SARS is not some corner in some republic. SARS is SARS because Walapa is South Africa. And therefore, what are the implications of their decisions to other victims of corruption? So I'm saying I'm just lifting that issue because it just worries me, because it doesn't seem that, yeah. So in a quest to enhance an ethical culture in the public service, all departments have established the ethics management infrastructure, ethics officers, ethics champions, ethics committees, ethics plans that are implemented and monitored. We have also reviewed the provincial fraud risk profile, which helps to zoom into problematic areas. We can never pretend that all is well and rosy when there are officials who are still reluctant to disclose their financial interests when the disclosure period arrives. And PSC shares with me other instances here. Umuntu akayichazi imoto yakhe apha ku-disclosure, athi uyilibala njani imoto oyiqhubayo? Akayidisclosanga imoto yakhe uthi uyilibele. So there's no that we must be attending to them. And when there are people who are determined to beat the system in one way or another, when we still have issues of irregular procurement and irregular appointments, irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, these are the things we're saying is not rosy. So the fight against corruption is for all of us. Let us continue to play our part to secure a brighter future for our children. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable MEC, for really clearing our minds on a number of areas, and also setting the tone for the discussions that we are going to have. A big round of applause for the MEC once again. MEC talks about the need to deal with causal factors. Getting at your time comfortable get symptoms. And these symptoms, if the root cause has not been dealt with, these symptoms will always be there, and we tend to be satisfied with being busy dealing with symptoms rather than dealing with the cause. Why are we remaining with the corruption, organic corruption continuing, whether it's driven from inside our institutions or also perpetuated by those that are outside but working with government in the form of tenders and all that? What is the problem? One writer identifies the problem of ego as the main cause of the problem. And when it defines ego, uthi, it is a mental dysfunction. Because when egoistic, you want to stand out, you want to be different, you always want to have an opposite. And you always feel inadequate. And it is always looking forward to material things to augment this inadequacy. That's ego. So immediately you are unable to augment your inadequacy with these material things that will give you this higher position as compared to other people. Uzawuthatha nezinto ezingezo zakho. And you will find other means of acquiring these things to address your inadequacy. Hence, a city, it is a mental dysfunction. Miles Munro, Miles Munro, uthi, there can be no change unless the soul changes. And the soul is the mind and your emotions. Uthi noba singenza ntoni change ayizubakho uba kutshintsha nganto apha nalapha ukuvuke isazela esiphilayo. So but mhlawumbi kwi-commission zake zidile naloo nto uba asidili na symptoms na okokokoko zithini causes zezinto, so that we can go to the root cause. What generates le nto? So that siyovala itephu le ibangela this kind of behavior. There's another video which is very short but it's very important as we are going to break for tea, and then when we, immediately after the video, I would request Mama Mugawe just to give us a sense when as breakaway is backup is the lady song, so that after tea we just move straight to those breakaway rooms. There's a tendency ke yobana emva kwe keynote address kucingela uba umcimbi ugqityiwe, and then people when they go for tea they decide to go away. I'm appealing that this full house was invited to deal with this important issue and we cannot leave it halfway. Over to you, sir.
Corruption is a vile disease that sucks and drains the health out of something good. Corruption in society is an evil moral infection that keeps community in the state of perpetual sickness. Corruption is a moral virus. It's so potent, it leaves its host sick, lethargic, and unable to realize and accomplish all that a well person can. Where corruption thrives, poverty and not prosperity thrives. Wealth is grabbed into the greedy, grubby hands of those who get fat on the toil and labor of good people. Corruption benefits only temporarily those who participate in it. Everyone else is a victim of the theft, the deceit, the dishonesty, and the lies that corruption feeds on. You need to know that a corrupt person is stealing from you. Corruption is filthy work and despicable acts of treachery done under the table and behind closed doors. Corruption is a disgusting shame. Corruption keeps a nation back from true development and from progress. Wise investors steer clear of a corrupt environment. They would rather put their resources into a place where the playing field of opportunity is equal for all and not bent towards feeding the financial lust of corrupt, lying, cheating, thieving politicians and government officials. How many wonderful development projects have been lost because the investors didn't want to do business in a swamp of evil? When those great projects go to another nation or to some other place, we all lose. Believe me when I tell you that corruption steals from you, it steals from all of us. Corruption plunders the nation's wealth. Corrupt people compromise on truth, equity, and fairness, choosing instead to feed off the short-term benefits of crookedness, exploitation, and financial perversion. Corruption is not just a personal matter, it's a culture. It's a way of life, not just for individual people, but for companies, communities, governments, and nations. Corrupt nations, hiding behind large companies, will seek to invest in other weak nations in order to take over the assets of the nation that they've invested into. They will provide financial loans to a nation for the much needed infrastructure, and they will do it with assets that they provide. They will sign contracts by lining the pockets of rotten government officials who participate in this kind of corruption and are then held hostage by their own deceit and greed. Corruption is nothing less than a form of theft and national robbery. A corrupt person steals from everyone in society. We all lose when corruption is rampant. Those who participate in corruption have chosen evil over good, lies over truth, and personal gain over well-being of all. To be corrupt means to be rotten. When meat is corrupt, it's rotten and it stinks. Rotten meat can't be eaten. When a person is corrupt, he's rotten and unfit for a place in the community. A corrupt person should be jailed in order to protect society from the vile deeds of the corrupt person. Government should be protecting us from the foul results of corruption instead of being the proponents and participants in corruption. When corruption is systemic, when it's a culture and a way of life, when corruption thrives, it destroys the health of the community and nation. Now let me tell you something. Defeating corruption is a very difficult thing. The love of money is the root of all evil, the Bible says. People who love money will do almost anything to get it. Those who choose to stand up against corruption, you need to know that we're going to be involved in a war. We will be threatened, vilified, intimidated, marginalized, and ridiculed. These kind of people who stand up against corruption will often feel alone, as if they are the problem instead of the solution. Corruption can only be defeated when enough people have had enough and decide to do something about it. Africa needs to raise up a new generation of corrupt-free young people who together, support of one another, build a beautiful, new, corrupt-free Africa. We need a new generation of young people to fill the places of leadership who think differently and are motivated not by greed, but a genuine sense of servanthood to the people of our community. The church exists to call the nation back to righteousness. We are here to lift the standard of good that God requires for prosperity and health to flourish across the land. The Bible says, "Woe to those who acquit the guilty for a bribe, but deny justice to the innocent. Therefore, as tongues of fire lick up straw, and as dry grass sinks down in the flames, so their roots will decay and their flowers blow away like dust, for they have rejected the law of the Lord Almighty." We all need to be reminded that from time to time, God has created everything. Therefore, he owns everything. He is the final authority over everything, and he has the right to determine how